Record. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Abigail Snyder's podcast. It's not just you. Our special guest today is Marnee Wolfert. Yay,
Maestro
Marnee!
now.
So, just a brief background of how I know Marnee. So, Marnee and I have been friends for 14 years, 15 years. We met in 2011, 2010, 2011. She's my friend from New York City when I lived back in my New York City days. And we met through doing a pro-life work together. We'll save that for another podcast if you're interested in all of those crazy happenings. And we also became roommates after that for 3 years. So we've seen each other's good, bad, ugly. We'll call it that. And we've seen each other through being in weddings together, being at funerals together. We've been together through breakups and also through miscarriages, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, what I wanted to start with before I give a timeline of Marnie's miscarriages that she has been so gracious to share with everybody today. And our hope and intent is to reach the women out there who have gone through a miscarriage and it's just very hushed and not talked about, and you feel like you don't have anybody, no outlet or somebody to talk to, a kind of support system. Marnie and I are here to contribute to a platform that's going to give you that support if you need it. So take what you need and leave what you don't. So Marnie's story is she actually had three miscarriages in 1 year, and it was last year. Where today is May 21st, 2025. And so she's going to talk about those in our short segment. And we're going to have an extended segment that I'll click a link in the bio that you can follow. But before we go through that timeline, I want to talk about first something very important, which is names. So God is big on Marnie means, and it means rejoice in Hebrew. And it also is kind of a root word for marina, so of the sea. So have you heard of that? What have you
I
known?
have, yeah. It's kind of hard to find my spelling too, but there's actually in Thai language, there's my name spelled as it is, and it also means like precious gem. So I like that one is fun too. But yeah,
That's
it's
perfect.
a unique name. Yeah.
That's perfect for you, Marnes. Um, yeah, so that's the meaning of the name Marnie. So Marnie actually, the three miscarriages that she had last year, she named each one of them. So I do want to talk about those briefly. The first one she had is Lucita, and that means light. The second one is Gabriel, which means God is my strength, hero of God. The third one that she had is Zelly, and that means noble or exalted. And those are the names, the meanings of those names. And Marty, you had said that you named them that, but that you also, what did you say?
That some of them, the names, the middle names that we chose were just as significant or more significant in naming our children. So it's kind of like yeah, there was a lot of intentionality there in how we named all of them.
Perfect. Will you go into that when we go through each child? Okay, and then let's start with your daughter that you do have right now.
Hmm.
She's your first and only child right now,
Hmm.
Rosalina, and also that you are currently pregnant. We'll get to that later. So just giving everybody a background of uh, Marty's past, what she recently went through, and her current state. So let's go back, though. Let's go back to Rosalina. And so that was May 2022. You got pregnant with her, and then January 2023 was when she was born. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So let's start there. So tell us about Rosalina. Tell us what was your experience like when you gave birth to her?
Mm. Yeah, a lot wrapped up in there. And I know you did mention names, so I'll just touch on her name a little bit. The Rosalina Maria Guadalupe is her full name. So
Mhm.
we're Catholic, we're Christian. We pull that into like our naming, we find it significant to name after like Mary or the saints. So
Right.
Guadalupe is a familiar one for many, and that was my husband's pick. And so Rosalina paired with that nicely. So Rosalina Maria Guadalupe is where she came from. But yeah, so interesting you ask about the birth part because there so much happens in pregnancy, and there were definitely challenging parts in there. For me, it was a whole new physical experience to be pregnant. I'd always wanted to have many children and be pregnant, but to do it at 34 years old, 35 years old, um, was pretty, life changing. But the
Mhm.
birth part, which is what had some amazing elements that were so much easier. And I say that because it was kind of a longer experience from when my water broke to when she was born. It was like maybe 36 hours. And there was a period in there where I was induced with Pitocin, and those were some pretty intense contractions, exhausting and scary at times. But then I got an epidural. My husband and I were pretty exhausted by that point, and I'd really wanted to go kind of all natural, right? That's what I had been hoping for. But this was long and we were exhausted. And so I got an epidural. And what that epidural did for me, which it doesn't, even most people who get an epidural maybe don't fully have this experience, but it worked perfectly for me. Within it, I was asleep and then I felt nothing for the entire rest of the birth. I didn't feel, that part where the baby's coming out, the transition, and the parts that are just usually so intense. My doctor, who has delivered many babies, was like shocked. She was like, "How are you so calm?" And I said, "I don't feel anything. I don't even feel the urge to push." So they had to kind of just watch my contractions on the monitor to say, okay, I think you should push now. Okay, the baby's coming. So I could
Wow.
very calmly, I was holding my legs and my husband was holding a leg and then doctor was, and just sitting in the right position and just watching her come out. Just watching with total calm and just total peace. And like there was my little baby's head. And then she did, the doctor did a little grab and a little twist and then there she was. And I didn't feel I got a little tear. I didn't feel the stitching. I didn't feel the placenta coming out, nothing. They did everything. And I was just totally calm and just soaking in my little baby. So that part I thought that part of birth was going to be like. So yeah,
How would you, if you could describe giving birth to Rosalina in one word, what would it be?
I guess first word that comes to mind is like amazing or in a different sense, like awe. I don't want to say awesome because that's used in such a different context, but like awe inspiring, right? I mean, I could
Hmm.
just, this baby is coming out of me. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was definitely amazing. Yeah.
And tell us how Rosalina is now. What does she mean to you now? Like when she's running around, what do you see her as?
Yeah, it kind of changes with like age and development. Right now, she's almost 2.5, and I
Mhm.
find her such a delight right now. That's always the word that comes to mind because she is just so full of life and joy and creativity and imagination and communicates very well, has a lot of words, and is just so loving. Even today, as I was getting ready for this podcast and put my clothes on, and I go downstairs and she says, "Oh, Mama's so beautiful," and came up and gives me this
Oh,
hug, and that's just, yeah, that's how she is, just so
that's
sweet.
so cute. I love
Yeah.
kids. By the way, listeners, I'm not married and I don't have kids and I've never been pregnant. So I'm just taking all of this in. I don't know if there's anybody else like that out there that's listening, but okay, well, thank you for sharing all of that with us regarding Rosalina, talking about life. Let's now transition into a more solemn topic and let's talk about what started happening when you had your first miscarriage. So that was with Lucita, right?
Mhm.
Tell us about that and tell us her middle name and why you named the middle name that one.
Yeah. So Lucita, little Rosalina was about a year and a half when we conceived Lucita. So we had been hoping to get pregnant sooner. And so that was a journey in of itself, the getting to the point of getting pregnant, right? And so we were very excited to find out that we were pregnant. And we, I'm working with some doctors, some specialists, just given certain hormonal things I have going on, as supplements and, kind of trying to make sure I have healthy pregnancies. And so they had recommended a 7-week ultrasound, but by the time we got to the 7-week mark in that ultrasound, there was no heartbeat. So we lost
Mm.
her probably maybe early in week 6 or something like that, little Lucita. And that was the first miscarriage I had had, and I knew miscarriages are very possible and in fact common, but that was very hard. That was very hard to kind of make that shift of when you get pregnant, you just expect you're going to have a baby. I mean, that's the normal, natural course of things. Your whole system gets ready for that. Your body, your mind, your spirit, everything's kind of preparing for that. And when that doesn't happen, then it's just such a shock and a jolt. And so little Lucita, as you said, her name does mean light, and her little name or her middle name is Maria. So again, with kind of that Mary tie-in, but kind of this sort of celestial, like, Mary light, it's kind of this heavenly, um, almost like, angelic type of connection there. Just um, thinking of her being in heaven, thinking of her being so pure and so good, not even born into the world yet, totally just innocent. Um, and yeah, so
I do want to cut in. I wasn't gonna planning on saying this, but I feel like this is important. You did something I've never seen another woman do, and that was it was with Lucita, wasn't it? Where you got a box and a box and had her. You did something to represent her death, and I remember you posting about it, and I just thought it was brave of you, and I felt like women needed to know that we're addressing this. We are talking about this. A miscarriage is not something that needs to be there doesn't need to have guilt. There doesn't need to have regret with it. It's not wrapped up in those things because God is sovereign. So maybe just talk a little bit about what led you, what drove you to do something like that, and what was it exactly? Because I'm not speaking
yeah.
detailed on it.
So I felt the strong need to memorialize, this little life. And a couple of reasons. I mean, because I knew that this life was in there, and I wasn't just going to sort of dispose of it, but at the same time, I knew the act of memorializing is just so important for our human grieving process, to kind of go through these steps of, interring in dirt and sort of, just different. I got sort of a ceramic planter pot, a nice looking one. And I hand painted on it just a little memorial of, loved and remembered and her name. And then that she was with us from July to August of 2024.
Yeah.
Um, and then she was so little, so young, so early in the pregnancy that we didn't get a full fetus that we could find, but we did get sort of the blood or the clot or the sac, right? That came out. And so we were able to bury that, and I also buried it with my positive pregnancy test and just a cross.
Mm.
And we were able to just have a nice little, just me and my husband, and my daughter was present eating ice cream at the time, but we were having our little memorial service, and my husband was another topic, but formerly a Catholic priest, and so just very
Another podcast.
yeah. So just very sweet that, and he just kind of, said some prayers, and we were able to have this more. And I think for him, it was in a different way, very also healing, because his whole body hadn't gone through what mine had, and kind of was deeply imprinted with this experience and this loss. But in the act of burial and memorial and commending, this little one to God, that really kind of helped for him too. So we did that also for the second one, and then for the third one, that happened in the winter kind of, and so we just haven't fully completed it, but we have a, kind of a plant for that too. And then the idea is we
Okay.
put them in front of our house and then we plant, bright flowers in them for the summer.
Wow. Okay, let's go back. So you just said, so we talked about Rosalina. You just talked about your first miscarriage, which was Lucita. That was July to August of 2024, which was 2 months. And the next miscarriage was October to November. So that was also a 2 month period where you were pregnant with Gabriel. So
Mm.
tell us about Gabriel, his name, tell us his middle name, and what was it like with that? Tell us two things, your physical state at that point, and then also where was your emotional state? Were you nervous or were you based on what had just happened, or what were you feeling at that time?
Yeah, yeah, it was at a time that hindsight tells me even more how intense it was than in the moment. Sometimes when you're in it, you don't fully recognize. But so the miscarriage with Lucita had wrapped up in early September, and then by my cycle in October, we got pregnant again. So this was with Gabriel. Um, and so that whole even month leading up to it, everything was an emotional roller coaster, which means there's kind of this just cycle of, first of all, what's going to happen with my cycle? Am I going to get pregnant? Am I not? And then taking the pregnancy test, is it going to be negative? There's emotion, that's connected with that. Is it going to be positive? There's emotion connected with that now, especially with having had a miscarriage. Um, and so I get a positive test, but it's faint. I'm testing early because I want to know, am I pregnant? I'm pregnant. And so I'm getting these faint tests, and as a result, I'm telling my provider, and she's having me take certain blood tests, but very quickly, I really only got probably 4 days of positive tests. And so it started to get a little darker, and then that sort of dreaded, it starts to get a little lighter again. And
So
you
you're
kind of,
saying 4 days so you said the line started to get a little darker. Meaning, are you taking tests all these days? Is that
yes, like so
okay?
from around, let's say maybe 9 days after ovulation, it can start to get faint positives. And so every day I'm taking a test to see if it's getting darker. I'm taking red dye
Gotcha.
tests. Um, and it starts to get a little darker, and then it starts to get a little lighter. And that's kind of when, your heart drops like, oh no. And then I'm simultaneously every few days taking an HCG blood test. So then you wait for that next test to come back and you see the HCG has dropped. So that's very hard, like another loss. So physical things that sort of help your body to like process the grief that's going on, just so quickly. And so going through now a second miscarriage, just about less than 2 months later. So
Yep.
um so that was definitely part of me mentally had been thinking, okay, a second miscarriage is very possible. I know that can happen. Like you have one, a lot of women have maybe a couple in a row. And I had gotten two of those pots that matched just in case there was another one. It's time to kind of do the memorial. The miscarriage process was shorter, but it was a bit more painful. And I think that was my body starting to tell me that it wasn't quite recovered even from the first one, because it's hard to tell what toll it takes on your body to go through that. It goes from pregnancy mode to, then miscarriage mode and all that bleeding and all that like change in there. And I think it was kind of not fully recovered. And so
Okay.
Gabriel, he was the name that was significant to us was Gerard. There's a Saint Gerard who's the patron of motherhood, childbirth, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And while pregnant with him, we don't know if it was a boy or a girl, but we're, giving names. Um, so while pregnant with this baby, it actually turned out that I think we got pregnant either on or a day away from his feast day, which was interesting. He just kept popping up for me, meaning we were traveling and we had to go to church somewhere, and it happened to be a St. Gerard church. And then we were at my in-laws, and Rosalina comes up to me with this random prayer card, and it's a St. Gerard prayer card. And at that point, I said, I think we should name this one something with Gerard. And then we
Mhm.
looked up his feast, and it was like the day of conception, you know? So,
Mhm.
but I didn't like Gerard as a first name. And so we came up with Gabriel that kind of sounded good as a first name. So Gabriel Gerard. Yeah. So,
Got you. Okay, so keep following suit with how would you describe one word, Rosalina? How would you describe in one word Gabriel? And I realized we didn't do Lucita, so we'll go back and do that. But with Gabriel, what would you describe that whole experience as if you had to choose one word?
oh, I don't know. It was short. I don't know. It was a very short experience.
So short.
Yeah, I think it's a little hard to even maybe separate it from all the miscarriages that happened in that time frame. It was just short and intense, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then what would you say for Lucita?
That one was very much more pronounced like sad, just that one
Mm,
hit much more as just this loss. I think just the unexpected, the first loss. So yeah.
okay. Okay. So now we're ending the timeline so you just told us about Gabriel, which was October 2024 to November 2024. Then from November 2024 to December 2024, you had Zelly. That was a miscarriage. So Zelly means noble, exalted. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so right after having the miscarriage with Gabriel, the next cycle I get pregnant again. And it's kind of this again, this just like anomaly where you're sort of like, whoa, I'm getting pregnant so easily. Like that is kind of an amazing thing. It's very exciting to get a positive pregnancy test. That's what you're hoping for. You're hoping for a positive. But then having just had two miscarriages almost back to back, it's sort of there's immediate this like fear, this like sort of guardedness of like what's going to happen. And again, you're dreading that you're going to see that line, start to fade out again. And this one was very quick too, like 3 or maybe 3 days, and then it was getting light again, and the HCG was dropping. So short, no time to there's no way to sort of know even why the miscarriages happened. So little, so short. There's nothing to test. There's nothing to kind of um there's theories, but even the doctors don't know like why exactly it happened like that. And it's interesting when you're not struggling with the infertility of being able to get pregnant. Clearly, we can get pregnant pretty easily, but this ability to sort of like keep the pregnancy,
The
there's these
same.
different versions of, yeah, of infertility people deal with. Um, so that one was just hit really hard because for some reason I did not think I was going to have a third miscarriage. Like it was a mental thing. Like I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't feel like that's, gonna be the reality. And
Mm-hmm.
she was gonna be, or the baby was gonna be born during a great time, when my husband's on break from school. So it just seemed like it was gonna line up this time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so hard. And that one, again, it hit my body even harder. That was at certain points in that miscarriage, I was having some extreme pain moments. The
Worse than the other
cramping,
two, the other two.
yeah. Yeah, no pain with Lucita. It just took a couple weeks to bleed, and then some cramping with Gerard, and this one just had some really intense cramping. And so I just at that point, it was just clear that my body and my, you know, emotions in my mind just needed a break for sure.
I remember that too.
Yeah. And so so then we took a few months break of even trying to get pregnant. And I was really, that was a period where I just really, I mean, both wanted to get pregnant and have a child, but also very much did not want to get pregnant because of the
Yeah.
risk of miscarriage that was just going to be too much. So, yeah,
I
so
remember
Zelly,
talking to you about that. You were just like, I just need a break. And I never really heard you say anything like that before. You were just like, and cut.
mhm.
But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that Zelly Marie. So, there's another saint recently a saint, Saint Zélie. She's the mother of Saint Therese of Lisieux, who's much more well known. But recently, Therese's parents, Zélie and Louis, also were made saints, which is super exciting because they're a married couple. And but she came to mind immediately with this one because she's a saint who suffered a lot of child loss herself. She
Mm,
suffered miscarriages, she suffered infants dying. One died because so for some reason, Zelly couldn't nurse her children, so she would give them to like a wet nurse, and they would live with the wet nurse, and the nurse just didn't feed the child, and it died of starvation, which is pretty devastating. Um, so Zelly is such an interesting saint in that way, and she still had, I think, five daughters. But there was a lot of mental health struggle in that family, the children or the parents. So it just felt like it kind of fit with all this child loss. And such a pretty name. So, and Zelly's name was Azalea Marie. Anyway, so Zelly Marie was what we did for that one.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this like flower pattern too, like azalea,
Mm.
Selena, beautiful flower.
Yeah, we have thought of the flower theme. Yeah, Rosalina.
And that's interesting because that connects with the burial that you gave each of the three miscarriages that you also put right next to like what can be considered death, flowers, right?
Hmm.
The flower. What are the flowers that you planted?
Well, last year we did what were they even? I'm not good with flower names, but they
I
were
know me
bright
either. I don't
yellow.
even know why I asked because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna Google it later because I don't know now.
Yeah, they were just bright yellow and
Cool.
bright colors, bright
Daffodil?
colors. Like maybe marigolds or geranium. I'm not even.
Marigold sounds right. It's like the ones that are like super dense and they're like do, like
Yeah, I don't know if that's the one or not, but my husband knows. He's good at these flowers. But yeah, I
we'll
just know
we'll
they're
we'll
pretty.
add, we'll talk more about this in the extended version along with some of the other things because I do want to hear more about your husband too. I want to know what was going on with that because you did mention that earlier. So again, guys, this will be in the extended version that you can do. We just wanted to have a short clip to have everybody just see what this is about, and then if you want to hear more, then there's going to be a separate video. But so Marnie, you this was your last miscarriage, and you had said so it ended in December of 2024, and that was when you said, I just need to take a break. But now you got pregnant in the following year, which is this year of March of
Mhm.
2025. And so, how many weeks pregnant are you right now?
12 weeks pregnant today. Hmm.
Yay, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So, there's hope and there's love and light, is what I'm feeling and thinking right now in this moment. And so the baby is due in December, right? December 3rd, 2025.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So there you have it, everybody. I wanted to take advantage of Marnie's willingness and just vulnerability and sharing her story with all of us. If you feel like you can relate to this, just leave a comment down below, or you can reach out to me, my email. Is this is just something that you can resort back to get any kind of support or know that you're not the only one that's going through something like a miscarriage because it is not talked about enough. One last thing, Marty, tell us now that you've gone through what you've gone through, what is one thing that you could leave with our audience? And what's something that you could tell our listeners, anything that's on your heart, if you could just tell them one thing? And then I also just realized I didn't ask if you could sum up Zelly's one word, what would that be?
Hmm. Um,
I know so many loaded
I don't
questions that are
know.
not totally organized.
Um, I'm gonna say the word special, but that's gonna be kind of like, maybe we'll dive into that, why that is, in the longer version, because it was
Perfect.
definitely a pivotal point. Um, but what to leave ladies with? Well, I did want to say, Abigail, even when you're just introducing this episode, it just struck me as so like significant and I'm kind of losing what other word, but like in honor that you are actually creating an episode, carving out an episode just to talk about and honor, these miscarried children. For me, as being their mother and having lost them, and as we've talked about, there's not always a lot of discussion about that, but they're my children, and I named them and I bore them, even for a short time. And so, as a mother, it just means so much to have that remembered and kind of memorialized in a sense. Here we are, we're thinking on them and we're remembering their stories. So for the mothers out there who've had miscarriages, I think that is just so important. When I made that Facebook post that you mentioned about the little memorials, I
Hmm.
had mothers reaching out to me, saying that they didn't maybe know what to do when they had a miscarriage, and they loved this idea of doing something to memorialize. And I think deep in their hearts, they wanted or needed something like that, but there's no precedent for it, or there's no,
Yes.
what do you do? I mean,
Yep. There's no
so I think,
guidance.
yeah, and also maybe sometimes feeling like they're kind of alone in needing that or wanting that. So
Oh,
I just encourage you to, all these women, to do whatever's on your heart to remember your little ones on their anniversaries, or when you lose them, or, just whenever, a candle, flowers, a cake, some type of burial memorial, whatever would be just peaceful for you to, like, don't be afraid to do that. Yeah.
I love it. That is such a good thing to end on. Just do what you feel is going to help you get through it despite the cultural norm. It's not a cultural norm to do something like that. It's just not in this culture. And so our we're this podcast is going to change that. That's the plan. Hopefully, we're going to see a movement go on. So I want to thank you, Marnie, for being with us for the short clip. And if you guys want to know more about her story, I'm going to be asking some further questions, deep dive into more of the miscarriages and what was physically going on with her. So if you wanted to know more of what happened between this time and this time, because that happened to me, things like that, we're going to dive deeper and into that. So, but we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for joining Abigail Snyder's podcast, and everybody have a wonderful day.